Hey, welcome to part two of my lectures on central banking in the United States. So it's 1789, the Constitution has been passed, we have an election, and we elect George Washington as president, we have a Congress, and people are worried about the viability of the country. There'd never been a country put together following the rules of the United States. It was a brand new thing. People didn't really think it was going to succeed. One of the things that some of the people were worried about is that the colonies had borrowed different amounts of money to fight the war, some more and some less, and some of the colonies were better off at paying their bills than other ones. So we had these colonies that were essentially bankrupt, we had these other ones that were kind of supporting them. And Hamilton was a big believer in centralizing the government, making this country a united thing that would actually work. And Hamilton saw it as a problem that some of these colonies were going bad on their debts and others were not. And he said the only way we're going to get this to work is if we take all of this debt issued by the colonies and adopt it as debt of the country and pay it off simultaneously so that we're all on equal footing. Okay? So at this time, political parties are starting, and so we have this party called the Federalists. Washington is a Federalist, and he's followed by Adams, who's a Federalist, and their Secretary of the Treasury is Hamilton. And so Hamilton wants this National Bank of the United States to deal with all this Revolutionary War debt. Now, the other party at this time is called the Democratic Republicans. And this is largely led by Jefferson at the time, maybe also a little bit by Aaron Burr a little bit later. So the Federalists are in power, and already there's kind of a regional conflict in the country. The Federalists are the party of the North. Now, this is the 1790s. The North is like Pennsylvania and Connecticut and places like that. And the Democratic Republicans are the party of the South. Okay, Virginia and South Carolina are their power bases. Those are the two big populous states at that point in time in the South. And the thing is, we don't realize it at this point, but back then, the richer part of the country was actually the South. Our vision of America at that time is kind of dominated by something a little bit later in time, sometime in the 19th century, when the North actually was richer. But in the late 18th century, the North was poorer. It certainly was doing okay, but it was not thriving, I guess. So the North was poorer, but an interesting feature is the South, while it was richer, was actually very illiquid. And the reason for that is they had all of this wealth, but the wealth was in the form of slaves, which, if you think about it, actually do confer a lot of wealth on the owner. It's not ethical or moral, but it certainly is wealth, but it's not very liquid wealth. And so the North, while it was poorer, was the one part of the country that was engaged in trade and actually getting a lot of money, and so they actually had much more liquid wealth. So along comes Hamilton and the Federalists, and they say, we want to have a bank. And the sort of conflict that you get now is the one that we still have between people who are liquid and people who are illiquid. People who are illiquid need the bank really badly because it helps them convert their illiquid assets into more liquid ones. But it also sets up kind of an adversarial relationship. The bankers are kind of on the other side of the deal. So there's very much a sense in which you can see these guys want the bank and these guys don't really want it, but they have to have it. And so they kind of feel like they're at odds with each other. So they get this first national bank of the United States in the 1790s, and it runs for a while, and it's fine, okay? But it's created by an act of Congress because it's not in the Constitution. So because it's created by an act of Congress, they can still do, but do not do very much, but used to do quite often, is they would set a time limit on their laws. So they would say, here's the law, we're going to see how it's going to work, and it expires in 20 years, and we have to come and revisit it. And so the First National Bank of the United States actually had a charter which expired after a certain period of time. Well, what happened is the Federalists won the first 3 elections, 2 for Washington, 1 for Adams, but in the election for 1800, Jefferson won. And the Democratic Republicans took power for the next 24 years in the country, and the renewal of the First National Bank came up when the Democratic Republicans were in power, and they simply didn't renew its charter. Okay, and it went away. Okay, it's a tourist attraction now in Philadelphia. You can go and see the First National Bank of the United States. It's still there. Okay, it's a nice building. Okay, and they give tours and whatnot. See you in part 3.